Here we have a model of HMS Victory. It was a ship of the line, 104 guns. Changed the guns several times, but at the time of the Battle of Trafalgar, the biggest guns aboard were 32-pounders. They were on the lower deck, 24-pounders in the middle, and 12-pounders on the upper deck. Clearly that was done for stability, to add the greatest weight at the bottom of the ship. The 32-pound guns weighed approximately 3 tons, so they had 30 of them. So there was a lot of weight, of course, and you wanted that weight lower down. Ship overall was about 220 odd feet, and you can probably add about another 100 feet for the bowsprit. The ship floated in about 29 feet of water. It carried a crew of 850. The main mast, which is the one in the middle, was about 205 feet from the waterline to the very top of it. It carried 35 sails, and it carried spares, of course, when it was going into battle. The 850 men aboard were not all Englishmen. They were in fact drawn from over 20 different nations. And it was true that in those days many of the crew of a ship had greater loyalty to the ship than to the flag that flew above it. So frequently captured sailors would change sides, sometimes to stay with their ship, of course. So here we have it, 104 guns, first-rate ship of the line. Typically, these would almost be the comparison today of an aircraft carrier. And aircraft carriers, first-rate ships of the line, were often not risked in battle. British ships were divided into 6 rates. The smallest, the 6th rates, were down to about 20 guns. They were used primarily for communication and for reconnoitering the enemy. The ships that were mostly engaged in warfare were the 2nd and 3rd rates, which would be guns having about 90 guns with a 2nd rate, and the 3rd rate ship having about 74 guns. They were the principal warships, the 2nd and 3rd rates. The 1st rates were typically the home of the admiral, and not only he, but his ship was considered extremely valuable, and so they usually didn't go into battle. On this particular occasion, Nelson did lead his troops, his seamen into battle. He was actually standing on the deck, on the after part of the ship. If I can point with my little laser here, just forward of the mizzen mast, and he was struck by a musket ball. We have a similar musket ball here, a musket ball fired from one of the French ships by a sniper. He was hit in the shoulder, the ball went through his chest and lodged in his spine, and he died about 4 hours later. But by then victory was assured, and he died knowing that his attack on the combined fleets had been successful, and they were unable to do as Napoleon wanted and sweep the channel clear. And in fact it had profound historical significance, because Napoleon was obliged to call off his invasion of Britain, and in fact he turned around and marched east to Russia. And we all know that his expedition into Russia met with disaster. So this Battle of Trafalgar had a very significant impact on the history of Europe and the history of Napoleon. The ship was built in the 1750s. It didn't have a particularly good start in life. It actually didn't go into battle for probably 15 years or so. It was kept sort of in reserve, and it was only when another battleship in the British Navy sank that there was suddenly a need for another first-rate ship. So this ship, which had been left pretty much to idle its time away at a mooring on the Medway, was brought into service and was refitted and became the famous ship which we know and revere in England as being the oldest naval ship in the world in continuous commission. It's in dry dock in Portsmouth, southern England, which is the home of the British Navy. It's in dry dock there and has been since about 1920, when they realised that maintenance of the ship was becoming prohibitively expensive if it were to be left afloat. So it's put into dry dock. So a frequent question you'll get asked is, how much older is it than the American ship, the Constitution? It's probably 30 or 40 years older. So the Victory is the oldest, but the Constitution is the oldest one that still floats, because the Constitution, as you know, which is in Boston, does in fact float and does very occasionally go to sea. This ship, as I say, was 220 odd feet long. It was about 50 feet in the beam. The mast, I've told you, the main mast is about 205 feet from the waterline to the very top of it. The main spar here across on the main mast was itself over 100 feet long, so the timbers in use on these ships was quite massive. It's quite remarkable when you look at one of these ships, and if you ever go to Portsmouth and go over this, you'll see the massive timbers, and when you consider that this is in the days before electric hoists and mechanical lifting devices, everything about these ships was done by hand. Probably took about 6,000 oak trees to build the Victory. Massive timber at the waterline. There was about 2 feet of solid oak was the wall of the ship. Speed, with full sail, it would probably, favourable wind, maybe 10 knots, something like that, maybe 11 miles an hour, just about. So they weren't fast. And in fact, when they went into battle, they didn't carry full sail. They typically would just carry the topsails, which is the second sail climbing up the mast, from the mainsail to the topsail to the top gallant to the royals. But they usually sailed with just the topsails in commission. Had, as I told you, all of those sails, they measured somewhere about 65,000 square feet of sail was carried aboard this ship. So quite a massive undertaking for the crew to work the sails, to unfurl them, and to get them in position ready for sailing. And of course, took a lot of effort. Probably 120 men would be up the masts, manning the sails, and it would probably take them about 10 minutes to either furl or unfurl the sails. So very, very labour intensive to operate one of these ships. Personal as far as a man being involved, which was Admiral Lord Nelson, only about 47 when he died. If you go to London and go to St Paul's Cathedral, Nelson is buried in the crypt immediately below the dome in a beautiful black Italian marble catafalque. Now, that wasn't originally made for him, I might add. It was made for Cardinal Wolsey, who was Henry VIII's favourite, fell out of favour with the king, and so this beautiful catafalque he'd had made for himself, he certainly wasn't going to be allowed to use that in his final resting place. So the catafalque was moved in the mid-1500s to Windsor, where it stayed in storage until Admiral Lord Nelson was brought home to England in January of 1806, and a massive state funeral was planned for him. And what better use could they put this beautiful black Italian marble catafalque to than to hold the mortal remains of our beloved Admiral Lord Nelson. So I hope you will enjoy this niche as much as I do. It's a fascinating story and of a fascinating man.